Radon Education Program and aired in cooperation with the Nevada Broadcasters Association and this station.
Welcome to Cup of Grace with Dr. Dorothy Poston. Jesus said, "Whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst." Overflow your vessel with God's goodness and mercy as we sip the Word of God together.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Janise Wiggins, and I am not Miss Dorothy Poston. As you may know, I am sitting in for Miss Dorothy Poston. I am so grateful for that and so grateful for being here. You may remember me from last week. Again, my name is Janise Wiggins with Grant Me Success, and Miss Dorothy Poston had me on to talk about the topic of grants last week. So Miss Dorothy Poston and I met several years ago through her church pastor, Pastor Henry, who is no longer with us, but he was the pastor of New Paradise Church. And Miss Dorothy, and actually Pastor Henry, reached out to me and wanted to find out about grants for his church program because they run a food pantry, a very wonderful program. They've been doing this for many, many years, and he was wondering about if his church could receive some grants for the wonderful work that they were doing. And so I had the opportunity to go and provide some grant education. I did a grant workshop for many of the members in their church that were interested in the topic, and it was just wonderful. It was prior to the pandemic, so Miss Dorothy and I were thinking about it, and I think it was around 2018 or 19 when I did this workshop with the church. The church is partnered with another wonderful nonprofit here in town called 3 Square Food Bank. You all may be familiar with it. And they just wanted to know how they could access some funds, possibly through the government or perhaps through foundations, either local or national foundations, to see if they could expand their food pantry program. And so since that time, the pandemic, came and went. And then Miss Dorothy Poston contacted me at the end of last year, probably around October, November, and she just wanted to reconnect with me and say, can we talk about these grants again? A lot of people were beginning to ask her because they know her background. You all may know it. She has extensive history in working with government programs and working with grants as well, and facilitating some social service and human service programs. And so she said, I'm interested in learning more about grant writing and improving my skill of grant writing. Do you have anything going on? And at the time, I did, for sure. So again, my name is Janise Wiggins, Grant Me Success, and my business is called Grant Me Success. And that is a business that provides board members, staff, volunteers, help ministry workers for nonprofit organizations as well as faith-based organizations, including churches, to learn about grants. I provide education about grants, just in general, what they are, because a lot of people say, well, I thought there was a separation between church and state, and I thought that churches or faith-based organizations could not get grants from the government. Well, you guys, that is really a misnomer. God's word says that our people suffer for a lack of knowledge. And so I am big on providing the community in general, but in particular, our faith-based communities with knowledge and information about how to get access to funding. Some grants do require that a organization has a 501c3 designation. That is a designation that is received from the IRS. But there are certainly some grants that allow churches and or faith-based communities to be able to apply directly for grant funding, whether it is government funding or through a foundation, a private or a public foundation. And what a stipulation may be on that grant is that they just don't want the faith based organization or the church to be attempting to proselytize people or making it a mandate or a requirement that that people would have to be a member of the church or participate in any programs or programmatic programs in the church. You just can't make that a requirement. Okay, the grant funds would be for a particular service, a social service, a human service, whether it be a food program, a housing program. There, are so many programs, a tutoring program for youth or children, perhaps maybe a workforce development program. There are so many different programs that can be funded through grants. So Miss Dorothy contacted me, and I had a grant writing academy at the time that we were starting in, I believe it was November of 2023. And so Ms. Poston enrolled in it, and we did that course for 8 weeks. And we talk about several different topics in that 8-week course. It's called the Grant Writing Academy. And I teach organizations about the grant writing basics. I teach about how to develop your programs if you don't have a program that's already developed. I teach you about budgeting, about doing the budget for grants. I know that when I first started writing grants, working with the budgets were one of the more difficult sections or parts for me to get a hang of, to get a hold of, and really learn what do I put, what categories, what items can I put into the budget. So I learned that over the years. And so in the course in my Grant Writing Academy, I teach about budgets. I teach about the main sections that you all will need to make sure that is highlighted in any grant application, to talk about why is this grant needed? Why does your organization need a grant? Whether it is a nonprofit organization, whether it's a church, whether it's a faith-based community, what is the reason? Why would your organization need a grant? Well, you would go about developing that in what's called a needs assessment. So that's one of the sections of the grant. And then connected to the needs assessment, you would begin to describe your plan to address those particular needs. So let's say in your community, homelessness is really a big issue, or food insecurity and poverty is a really big issue in your community. Then perhaps you would want to write about some of the statistics, some of the things that you were just visually seeing in your community. And then in the program approach section of a grant, you're going to start to talk about what is your organization actually doing to address that need, okay, to address that problem. And then, of course, you need to have a budget, okay? Those are the primary sections of a grant, and that's what I teach my students in the Grant Writing Academy. If your organization is interested in learning more about grants, if you guys have somebody with maybe within your congregation, on your board, or if you yourself just want to learn a little bit more about grants and understand how your organization can get access to grant funding, you can go to my website. It's www.grantmesuccess.com. You can email us as well if you're interested in learning about our courses. We have 2 different courses that's available to you. We have a Grant Writing Academy, as I shared with you, and then we have a Nonprofit Leaders Academy. It's so important, as I shared with you through my business, I really focus on education and knowledge and getting the knowledge out there into the community, because as the word says, our people have been suffering and could continue to suffer because just of the lack of knowledge. And so my business, Grant Me Success, is built around getting knowledge and information out there about grants, grant writing, and nonprofit administration. So a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference between a nonprofit 501c3 organization and perhaps a church, right? Like, why would my church need to become a 501c3 entity through the IRS? Would that actually be beneficial for our organization, to our church, to develop a separate 501c3? I get that question a lot. And so I'm going to help you understand just a few things about why it might be beneficial for your church to get a separate nonprofit 501c3. So as I shared earlier, right, there is this concept or idea about separation of church and state. And perhaps, you want to be able to have the freedom to do things in your church that you don't want there to be a significant amount of government oversight over the church's programs. So then it might be beneficial for the church to consider establishing a separate 501c3 entity. Okay. Now let's talk about what's going to be required to be able to establish a 501c3. But before we talk about that, I want to make sure that it is understood that the church will not own the 501c3. Okay, that is a distinction that I want to make sure that we make, because a 501c3 nonprofit organization is a public charity. It's a public entity. And that's why it enjoys the privilege of having the tax exempt status. Okay, so it's going to be a separate entity from the church. Certainly people from the church can be on the board. Okay, the pastor can be on the board. You can have church members that are on the board, but essentially it's the board members of a nonprofit organization are just people from the community who come together for a common purpose, common mission, to be able to establish this entity. And then that nonprofit organization, once it receives the 501c3 status, can go after grants, separate and apart from the church. Okay. It is important when you are working to establish a separate nonprofit 501c3 entity that is separate from the church, consider who you're putting on the board. Consider who you're putting on the board. There's going to be 3 required positions. It's going to be a president, secretary, and treasurer that are going to be 3 required positions to establish a nonprofit 501c3. But you want to be mindful that the IRS will consider, because remember, this is a public charity, public entity. It's owned by the public, if you want to use that word, then there will be some questions on the application about the board members, who they are, and there will be questions about blood relation and any marriage or familiar relationships with the board members. And so you want to be cautious that you're not putting all related, blood related or related by marriage board members on the nonprofit board. The IRS might look at that in a negative aspect to say, well, really in question, is this really a public charity or is this a family entity, right? Is this perhaps a family private foundation, or is this a family business and not a nonprofit at all? Okay, so you just want to be mindful of that. My recommendation to make sure that you can get that application through as quickly as possible, if possible, is to have 3 unrelated board members, president, secretary, treasurer, when you are initially applying for that 501c3 status to the IRS. Okay, all right. Whew. Well, that covered in great detail about just getting your organization started, if your church is interested in establishing a separate entity to go after grant funding. Again, it's not required. It's not required that your church would have to establish a 501c3, but there might be some benefits to it. If you want to talk about that more directly with me or my team, you can reach out to us at 702-440-9390. Again, that number is 702-440-9390. Again, if you're just tuning in, my name is Janise Wiggins. I am the CEO and owner of Grant Me Success. I am sitting in for Miss Dorothy Poston here on the Cup of Grace radio show. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. I was invited to sit in by Miss Dorothy Poston. She is one of my Grant Writing Academy graduates. We met several years ago and we recently reconnected, and she attended my Grant Writing Academy. That, which by the way, I taught that live, but it is now available online for you guys. You can enroll in the Grant Writing Academy if you are interested in learning more about grants. You can visit www.grantmesuccess.com to learn more about grants and how to write grants. If you just are tuning in, we're just talking about grants and if your church organization can get access to grants, how is it that you do that? So one of the main questions that I get when people reach out to me is, Janise, can you help our organization get a grant? Okay. In short, the answer is yes, I can help. My team is willing to help. I work with a team of grant writers. It's not just myself. But the second question that I get is, how do you find grants? How do we even find grants? Well, there's many different types of grants, okay, and many different places that you can begin to look for grants. So if you have a pen and paper handy, write this information down because I'm going to give you some tips on how to find grants. Okay, so there are several different types of grants, and I kind of try to think about them in order of difficulty. Okay, order of difficulty. So let's start with the easiest types of grants first. The easier type of grant applications will probably be available through either corporations or foundations. Okay, so corporations or foundations. And how I help people to think about, well, where can we get a corporate or a foundation grant? All right, let's think about big businesses out there. Let's think about big companies that you all probably shop at already. Okay, where you are a customer of theirs, maybe you are a client of theirs, and you want to look at their company, at their service, and see, do they have an adjoining foundation? All right, let me help you think about this. Have you ever shopped at Walmart? Have you ever shopped at Walmart? Okay, here's a plug for them. You probably have shopped there. How about Target? How about Target? Have you ever shopped at Target? Well, did you know that both Walmart and Target have a foundation? They have a foundation, and what they do through their foundations, it's a separate arm, separate entity from the actual store that you're probably used to shopping with, but affiliated. And through their foundation, they offer grants to communities. Okay, they may offer those grants to individuals. They may offer those grants to nonprofits. They may offer those grants to churches. So how about this? Here is the very first grant that I want you guys to take a chance at applying for and learning about. Go onto your computer. There's a wonderful thing out there called the internet. It's called Google. I want you to Google for the Walmart Foundation grant. And I want you to look up that application and see if there is a community grant, a local community grant that your nonprofit organization or that your church can apply for. Many of these applications are available online. Many of the foundation and corporate grant applications are relatively easy for you to complete. But if you feel a little intimidated, remember you can always reach out to Grant Me Success. Go to our website, grantmesuccess.com, and maybe we can provide some feedback to your organization about how to properly fill out that grant application. But that's one, okay? That's one tip for you guys to start looking for grants. Look for corporations, look for foundations, Verizon, right? Think about these big name companies, Verizon, T-Mobile, think about pharmaceutical companies. A lot of these companies, corporations, have foundations as well. Look for them, okay? All righty. Then there may be city grants. I live in the city of Las Vegas. We're here in Las Vegas. Look for the city of Las Vegas. Perhaps you live in the city of North Las Vegas. Maybe you live in the city of Henderson. Look on their websites and find out and use Google and see, do they have grants that are offered through the city? All right. We all live here in Clark County. Okay. Look in your county. Perhaps you're listening to this radio show or you're watching on YouTube, and perhaps you live in another state. Look at your county's website and find out, does the county offer grants for the particular service that our nonprofit organization or that our church would like to offer, okay, or that we're engaged in. All right, then there may be state grants. I live here in the state of Nevada. I know a lot of you all do as well. If you work within, let's say, providing tutoring services, okay, perhaps you can look at the state of Nevada's website and find out what grants they have available. Look at the Department of Education. The state has a Department of Education. Look on their website and see, do they offer grants to nonprofit or to churches that are engaged with student success and helping to improve student academic performance. Okay. I had one client who reached out to me who is a dental hygienist, and she was able to go on to the state's website and find a grant that provided financial support to do dental exams and provide dental referrals and oral hygiene care and services to low-income communities. So that was a pretty fabulous grant for our community here. And then, of course, the federal government. The federal government has a huge budget for grants. Did you guys know that the federal government gave out $1.2 trillion last year in grants? I'm going to say that again. Your federal government here in the United States gave out $1.2 trillion in grants. To who? To who? Where did that money go? It went to nonprofit organizations, faith-based communities, and organizations. Perhaps some churches were able to get access to that funding, as well as other municipal organizations. So the federal government, the reason why I was telling you to look at your city, at your county, at your state for grants, is because the federal government will oftentimes sub-grant money down to municipalities. And then those municipalities further sub-grant that money out to the local community. All right, you got to follow the money. Follow the money, you guys. All right. I hope that that information was helpful for you guys. I know that we don't have a lot of more time, but I'm so glad that I've been able to have this time with you just to teach you a little bit about grants. If you guys want to know more about grants, if your organization, whether it's a nonprofit or church, wants to learn more about grants, you can go to my website again. It's www.grantmesuccess.com. grantmesuccess.com. Again, my name is Janise Wiggins. I'm the CEO, founder, and principal grant writer for Grant Me Success. If you want to reach me by phone, you can give me a call at 702-440-9390. So we've talked about a whole lot in just this short period of time. I've helped you guys to learn more about setting up a nonprofit organization. We talked about the primary components that you're going to need to have. You got to start with your board members, right? You guys will make some bylaws, sign some articles of incorporation, go to your state. You're going to have to incorporate your organization in whatever state you're in, and then you'll apply to the IRS for 501c3 status. Then you're ready to start looking for your grants, okay, that are out there for the particular program that you're interested in. Where are you going to look? We covered that already. We said you're going to look for foundation and corporate grants. Look at your city, your county, your state, as well as the federal government. I know that this can be a pretty daunting topic, but we teach this information so that you guys can have the knowledge. We have a grant writing academy and we have a nonprofit leaders academy. I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you guys today. Again, Janise Wiggins with Grant Me Success. Thank you so much to Miss Dorothy Poston, and thank you to KKVV for having me on today.
We hope your cup was filled with the word today. Tell a friend and join us again on Cup of Grace with Dr. Dorothy Poston, Fridays at noon, right here on KKVV 1060 AM, Las Vegas.